So it was 1957 as an undergraduate. I had the privilege of being working as a soils technician on a project from Rutgers University. Rutgers had a long heritage in the 50s of graduate students doing their dissertations on the North Slope. And I became, I think, number 4 in terms of a dissertation, but I was preceded by by 3 others at least, under the tutelage of John Tedrow, who was a famous polar soil. So I was working on a project in those days looking at the evolution of carbon dioxide from Arctic soils. That was back in 1957. And I was a technician doing the measurements all summer. We were in the old ARL building, which the skeleton of which I think still exists at Gnarl, but I'm not sure. It burned down. There was a fire, and most of it was destroyed. I don't know if they destroyed the building or not. It's just in front of what was called the Animal Research Building. I forgot the acronym for that. In any event, 1957 was a great summer for me, and a great experience. And I then later, as soon as I became a graduate student, I returned to Barrow to do my dissertation in the Brooks Range. So I spent 3 summers in the Brooks Range, in the Eastern Brooks Range in ANWR, what was not then ANWR, but looking at soils formation. And it was a great experience and a great introduction to the logistical capabilities of ARL and NARL at the time.
What highlights stand out from your experience doing Arctic research?
Well, my entire career was, as I mentioned, was devoted to Arctic research. So it's really difficult to pinpoint any one thing. It was the support we got for logistic support for drilling, for auguring, and of course all the native folks that were involved, including your grandfather, I believe, were instrumental to the success of our work. Well, in any event, a lot happened there in the 60s due to the support we got from the local ARL. And that was followed in the 70s by a very large international program, which kept Barrow on the map in terms of scientific leadership internationally. That was a Tundra International Biological Program, Tundra Research Program. And so there's been many fond memories back then. And that later led to the work in NPRA during the cleanup of the PET 4, and then along the Hall Road when the highway became available. But everything came out of Barrow at one point or another for much of my career. So I owe a lot to the local community as well as to the people that were all involved. Kenny Tuvak comes to mind, and many, many others who helped us do the work that we were required to do.
Are there things you learned from Arctic residents or indigenous knowledge holders that helped you as a scientist understand what you were seeing, and what were they?
That's a real tough one. I think other disciplines can answer that question much more easily than I can. But the things that I looked at, permafrost and soils, were not traditionally the topics of the local folks. Let me leave it at that. Other than knowing that if you did the wrong thing, the permafrost would start thawing and things of that sort. But so it's hard to say. I depended a great deal on local residents. Let me put it that way. And then by depending upon them, I guess I learned a lot. But it's almost impossible for me to pinpoint, what I learned. We did it later on in the late 90s, early 20s. We did have a project on meat cellars, and that brought us in contact with many, many folks, including your parents with your meat cellar. We were instrumenting the meat cellars to look at the gradual warming of the permafrost and the impact on the storage and quality of the foods that were in the meat cellar. So we had a lot of contact with local residents, including Harry Brower with the Barrow community meat cellar. And I guess I did learn a lot. I didn't realize that the entrances to the meat cellars. Some of them would be kept open during the winter to cool them. I would never have thought of that, but I remember Harry telling me that. And we learned a great deal, about the management of meat cellars and this how important they were and still are, I assume. So I have a feeling at the meeting this week, you're going to hear about a traditional meat cellar at ARL, the one that was put in during the 1940s when the Navy was supporting the PET 4, because there's a traditional meat cellar about 40 feet deep right near the bark. And we keep talking about it because it'd be a wonderful opportunity to reoccupy it and use it as a research base. Ben Jones will be talking about this, I'm quite certain. So in any event, that kind of a rambling answer to your question. Yeah, we just got to know a lot of the local residents who were working at NARL, and they were always good companions and friendly, colleagues, and so that's an experience that we all remember and cherish and respect. So I think that's the best way I can answer that.
Do you have any closing thoughts?
Okay, well, it's a combination. Since the 50th anniversary, and I'll be reporting on this during the conference, we developed the Barrow Environmental Observatory. And one very major aspect of that was outreach. It was all done under the Barrow Arctic Science Consortium, BASC and Glen Sheehan. And we put a tremendous amount of effort into that in the 90s and the first decade of the 21st century, up until about 2010 or so. So one aspect was outreach, and we spent a lot of time with the schools. So I don't know whether, as you were growing up, if you had any experience with us, but the science teachers were involved, Leslie Pierce, Tim Buckley, and many others, with bringing students out to the BEO out along Keikita Road. Some folks won't know what I'm talking about, but you do. And the students are still coming out. It seems like it's carried forward from those days in the 90s and early 2000s when students were involved hands-on. So I think that to me is a lasting experience of our efforts during those days of trying to have outreach. We had a Saturday schoolyard program, which had a seminar every Saturday for several years at the Bark. I don't know, who around Barrow would remember things like that, but I don't know if it still goes on or not. But these were major outreach efforts, which I'd like to think are part of the legacy of many of the things that were going on through BASC. And I know UIC tries to sustain some of these activities, but I don't keep up on the details now. Hopefully, we do know, as you saw in you'll see in my talk, that the local schools, the elementary school kids are still coming out to the BEO as a field experience. So, and I hope I think you yourself are sort of an example of, the evolution of the Barrow schools education system and how it translates into higher education and so on. So I think those are my lasting thoughts. I said at the 50th, I said that 25 years from then, we would still be talking about the future. And I think now with the 75th, we'll be talking about the next 25 years. And I suspect there'll be things that will continue to expand in diversity and complexity, but many of the traditional approaches will still be there. So it's been a great experience over the many years. And I hope these few minutes of talk will help others. So I guess I'll just conclude on that and wish everyone well in the future, next 25 years.